Look, we don't control what's happening in the world. We don't control, by and large, who our leaders are. We don't control, by and large, what our leaders do. We don't control the ethics or the standards that other people hold themselves to. I wish it were otherwise, but it isn't. But the one thing we do control, one thing I've been thinking a lot about now, as it feels like the world is falling apart, is we control who we are. We control what we do. We control the standards we hold ourselves to. It comes down to character. Character, or a lack thereof, is kind of why we're in the mess that we're in, and it's going to be our way out of this mess. I read this book on character by General Stanley McChrystal back in December, which feels like a lifetime ago. That's what living in a world of characterless leaders will do to you. There's been disasters since, there's been corruption since, there's been needless division, there's been hateful things that have happened, there have been terrorist attacks, there's been a lot. And I've been thinking about this book almost every day since. The subtitle is Choices That Define a Life. That's what character is. It's not anything anyone makes you do. It's not necessarily something that's even incentivized or rewarded, but you either have character or you don't. You either make character-driven choices or you don't. And so I was really excited to have General Stanley McChrystal on the podcast to talk about what felt like a throwback kind of a book. It's really a series of essays, some short, some long, all about the idea of character, what it means, how we develop it, how it challenges us, how we are challenged to live up to it. And I think everyone should read this book. And I am really excited to have you listen in on this conversation that I had with General McChrystal. He is best known for his Joint Special Operations Command, which he held in the mid-2000s. After his time in Afghanistan and Iraq, he built a consultancy firm called the McChrystal Group, works with executives and Fortune 500 companies and multinational corporations, trying to help them deal with change, deal with building teams. And for all that work, this book is much more individual. This is much more about what we do as human beings with the problems, dilemmas, crises, and opportunities in front of us. And I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will enjoy listening to it. Thanks to General McChrystal for coming out. If you haven't read his other books like Team of Teams or Risk, I think you are missing out as well. But this is my favorite of all the books he's written. And we talked before a couple years ago about his Risk book. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I think you will like it too. Two of your books are probably on the wall in here. Did you see it?
One of them is up there. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a company called Books by the Foot, and they do it for like film sets and stuff. And so that's who we used to send them in. But then I asked Portfolio to send me a copy of every book in their
That's cool.
In their thing. So I think you should be in here at least.
Yeah.
When I don't know if Risk had come out yet.
It's so easy to get old books now because people don't keep them like they used
to. I know. Yes. And you can tell, you can kind of see like different eras, like, oh, this person was super popular then. And so it's probably like they died and then their kids took them to Goodwill or whatever.
Exactly.
What am I supposed to do with dad's books, you know?
My house is full of books and nobody's going to want them.
Yes, I know. So. I know. It's sort of a metaphor. You like collect all this stuff and then it's worth something to you. And then it's not just worthless to someone. It's like less than worthless.
Because they got to get rid of it.
I know. Although I just saw there was an auction. I'm into like weird antiques. It's very clear that Sherman's great-grandchildren are finally getting rid of all his shit.
Wow.
Because like there were all these like, it's like a signed copy of Grant's memoirs stamped with Sherman. And it clearly went from him to his son to his grandson. And his great-grandson's like, what am I going to do with this?
I've got stuff like that. I've got my grandfather's old swords and stuff like that. And nobody is going to want them. Hopefully one of my granddaughters will take them out of, something, but...
I would have liked to have that. It's like it's worth more to someone who's not related to you than your own family.
Exactly. Funny, but good.
Did you work out this morning at the Lost Spot? Did you run or what did you do?
Today was a lifting day.
Nice.
So I'm 70 now, so I do I do an hour and a half, whole bunch of abs, and then some lifting, not impressively.
Really?
And then the other day I do an hour and a half each day. The other day I do 70 minutes on an elliptical, then 20 minutes on an indoor bike.
Wow.
Which, you have to watch YouTube. You have to be watching something.
You have to occupy the mind, otherwise you're not. Yeah.
I do that every day, 7 days a week. My wife gives me a hard time because I never take days off.
Yeah.
Even if we travel at like 5 a.m, I get up at 2.
Yes.
because my mind will be better if I work out.
I know. I didn't get to this morning because I was staying in the same hotel as you, and I had my kids. It's actually an interesting question. Maybe it goes to your risk book. What age can you leave children unoccupied in a hotel room?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our oldest granddaughter's now just turned 11, and her sisters are 8 and 5. But I wouldn't leave them.
Yeah, I know.
Unless I was like next door.
I know. I took my 6-year-old to Las Vegas with me a couple weeks ago. I had a talk. He was out of school, and I can't perform unless I have worked out first.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, you're going to sit here. Here's your iPad. I'm going to do a very fast run on this treadmill. And I was like, it seemed normal to me. And then there was, of course, no other children in the gym doing this. But I was trying to think. I was like, I think I might be able to sit with it. But if my wife found out that I went for a run while I left them in the room, she would murder me. So
yeah, no, same way. We've got the 3 granddaughters, and we told the oldest we'll take her wherever she wants when she's turned 10.
Yeah.
We're thinking she's going to want to go to Paris, and she goes, Ohio. Really?
Why Ohio?
Really? I have no idea.
Did you go?
No, not yet. We're going to take her as soon as she wants to go. So that's
a real fun
almost
trip to
a year.
Cleveland, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are you talking about? But
well, I loved the book. And I thought maybe we start with character.
Sure.
Because obviously we talk a lot about character, but you have a pretty good definition of it, which I don't know if I'd seen. Like, character is one of those things when you see it, but it is a hard thing to define.
Yeah, it is.
What's your definition?
Well, my definition is that it is a combination or equation, a product of 2 things. There is your deeply held convictions. And I've always got to explain that because it's not just little things you believe.
Yeah.
It's things you've pressure tested.
Yes.
Things you've thought about. Things you're willing to live to or die for.
Yes.
Times your personal discipline, which means if you have no discipline, the output is 0. Because we can all have these great convictions, but if we don't follow them, we don't have character.
Your ability or your willpower to bring them into existence that has to be layered on top of what you actually think. If you don't stand for anything, obviously you have no character, but you could be a very sort of philosophical and thoughtful person, but you need a certain fortitude to will them into existence.
And that discipline, I widened that a bit because sometimes it's courage if you're under great pressure. Sometimes it's just the force of habit. You got to force yourself to do those things that you believe. And most of us don't do that perfectly.
Yes. Well, it is interesting because we tend to think of virtue or character as a thing that you have or a thing that you are. And I do think when you go back to the ancients, they were very clear that it was a thing that you did. Like Aristotle is saying that virtue is basically a habit. It's a practice. It's not. It's like any other skill. Like it seems weird to reduce something so moral down to a skill, but again, just thinking it doesn't mean anything. It's actually your ability and your track record of doing it that makes you the thing.
And we can be both at the same time, or both at different periods. I tell the story of Byron de la Beckwith in the book, who is a young Marine in 1942, goes to Guadalcanal. Then he is badly wounded at Tarawa, is mustered out as an American hero.
Yeah.
And part of the Tom Brokaw's Greatest Generation.
Yeah.
20 years later, he murders Medgar Evers in his front yard.
Yeah.
And so was he an American hero? Or was he a psychopathic, racist murderer?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Yes. That actually is fascinating. I don't think it's something we talk about, just how, like, the bravery of the people who went overseas to fight fascism and then came home and were the fascists is a part of American history that we just kind of skip over.
And do we have good days and bad days? And it gets to as the Greeks said, your virtue is what you do. And I think that's what your character is. So we do have days when my character is better than other days. Mm-hmm. And we have moments when I'm embarrassed by my character. Yes. And we have other times which I feel very good about it. And I think it's true of all of us. And I think it's true of our society too. We kind of rise sometimes, and then other times we scrape the bottom.
Or maybe with someone like that, or some other people that we could point to now, where So if the equation is your deeply held beliefs with your willpower and fortitude and commitment and all your actions. So what happens when you have someone who they have the fortitude, they have the courage, they have the strength, and then their compass gets spun around, or they're, in a less eloquent way to put it, what happens when their brain gets fucked up, which happens, right? People get sucked down rabbit holes. Like, this is why I think when we look at the four virtues, courage is important, discipline is important, justice is important, but then wisdom, the ability to separate a good cause from a bad cause, truth from fiction. I think you sometimes see people who actually are high character, but they got spun around, and now they think that this thing is a cause worth killing for, giving everything for, but they're just not on this planet anymore.
That's right. Or sometimes they get on the bus and they kind of don't realize what they've done.
Yes.
Suddenly they find themselves, oh my God, I am in a group or with people who are doing things that I fundamentally don't agree with.
Yes.
But it's hard to back off once you're committed.
Yes. Well, you talked in the book, this is something I related to, like, I think when you look back on your life, however old you are, whatever you've gone through, you're going to wish you were more contemplative and sort of principle driven. Like, you look back and there's all these situations where you had your reasons, but I've found that the reasons don't age well. And it is kind of a shame that we leave the sort of reflective part to the end of life. We should be doing it as we go. I think about different decisions I made or people I worked for, things where I was in where I was just, as you said, just kind of going along with it, or just too busy. And I wasn't going, does this align with who I want to be? Am I making the world better or worse? Is this right or wrong? I was just doing. I wasn't thinking about it the way that I think I'm better at thinking about it now.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think of the story of Robert E. Lee, of course, who preceded me at the military academy by many years. More years than people want to say, but
not that long.
Yeah, he was known as the Marble Man as a cadet, and it wasn't a compliment.
Right.
People meant that he was too stiff and he was too interested in his future. And I go back to my time at West Point, and I didn't think that way. I was there trying to wrench every bit of good time that I could out of a place that didn't want you to do that, and I almost lost it all.
Yeah.
Because of my lack of personal discipline, and I could have been thrown out. And it wouldn't be funny now if I was telling you I almost graduated from West Point. But you want life, you want to have a long-term view of life, but you don't want to be old before your time.
That's true.
And there's that constant tension.
Yeah.
How much of a very mature adult should you be when you're still young?
Yeah.
But at the same time, don't make life tarnishing mistakes.
My experience with the service academies, I am blown away when you meet these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids and you're just like, I wasn't like that at all. Right. Like there's a seriousness and a gravity and a dignity. And also I would say like an earnestness that I think I was too insecure or fundamentally unserious, to one have even qualified for one of the academies, but just to be thinking about some of the weighty things that they're already thinking about at that age is very impressive.
Which I agree. And I know your time at the Naval Academy is really valuable. And I think all the academies reflect that. And the challenge is always, I never wanted to see cadets who want to be admirals or generals or think about that.
Yeah, that's true.
There are always a few in every class who are already thinking about it. Most of them want to be lieutenants or captains. They want to be good lieutenants or good captains.
Yeah.
I think that's about the right focus. They want to be good sailors or good soldiers. If you're starting to think, I am going to be a great person someday, then I think you lose focus.
Well, that's probably the John Boyd thing about the to be or to do. Are you trying to go somewhere to accomplish and do a certain thing, or are you after a certain title or rank? And you're kind of you're forgetting that those things are extra. They should be rewards for doing things. It's the same for a young person today that wants to be famous. No, you want to be so good at something that fame is perhaps a byproduct of what you're doing. But if the aim is fame or money, you've got it backwards.
Yeah, and I think if you are trying to be so careful you never make any mistakes, that you are unlikely to accomplish much either. Yeah.
This idea that character is destiny, I come back to because character is fate, because it's true. You can sort of see in someone, and either their fundamental greatness or their flaw. And then I don't know if I like the idea that we're fixed, that we can't change. You seem to think that character is something that can evolve and grow and change, right? That's something you can work on like any other skill?
I think it has to.
Yeah.
I don't think my view of my character when I was young was static. Yes. I had a sort of general heroic view of what my father was or what other heroes were. But as I went through life, a couple of things happened. One, life gets more complicated.
Yes.
And those things you think, in this situation, I will do this or I will do that. And the reality is it gets gray, new pressures, new challenges. And so you think differently. And if we don't grow, then I think shame on us.
Yes. If you're the same as you've always been, then you're saying that, like, have you ever heard that people go, if 17-year-old me could see me now, they'd kick my ass. And it's like, who cares what a 17-year-old thinks? Like they had such a the idea that the smallness of your world then, that you're trying to get back to the purity of that is silly. Obviously, there's, I think, an idealism that you want to protect, that you shouldn't necessarily get more jaded and cynical as you get older, but your view and your understanding of things should certainly evolve.
I remember an old quote by a Frenchman. He was told his son had become a communist. And he said, if my son had not become a communist by age 20, I'd have disowned him. Yeah. If he's still a communist at 30, I will disown him.
Yes. Well, there's that quote, like, if you're not liberal when you're young, you have no heart. If you're not conservative when you're older, you have no brain. I've always hated that quote, which, by the way, is a very old quote. But what I hate about that quote is sure, as you get older, you should get wiser. But the idea that you should become more risk averse, more closed off, that your heart should harden as you go. And here we're talking about lower C conservatism, not any one specific political policy. But the idea that you must become more conservative as you get older seems profoundly sad to me.
Yeah, as you see more of society, I would like to believe that your empathy for people.
Yes.
As you experience some of the difficulties other people do.
Yes.
We had a fascinating ride in an Uber driver here today. And he had served in the Army starting back in 1988. And then he'd gone, after 4 years, he'd gone into the Texas justice system. He'd worked in a couple of different prisons and jails. And he had a view of the world that's not exactly mine, but he had a view of the world that was pretty thoughtful for his journey.
Yeah.
And so you have to respect that. You have to say, he grew with it, and now he's got grandkids, and he's thinking like I think. It was very interesting.
Yeah, there is something about it's like exactly reverse. I think that like the older generation should be all about sort of keeping things as they are because they're not going to be around. If anything, you should become more empathetic, more concerned with the problems off in the distant future because they're going to affect, the people that you claim to care about the most. It's like, I love my grandchildren more than anything. By the way, I'm willing to bankrupt the country to make sure my benefits stay the same. You know what I mean? There's something backwards about how we're doing it. Like I gave this talk at this biohacking conference a couple weeks ago, and there's this technology now where old people can get blood transfusions from young people. The idea is like the blood transfusion from a younger person in an older body reinvigorates the older body. But I said, to me, this is the perfect embodiment of our ass backwards system where the old are sucking the blood from the young instead of planting trees in whose shade they'll never sit, But yeah, I think if you get more cynical as you get older, that's very sad.
Well, it is. I mean, there was a movie that I watched a few years ago about raising orphan children and then harvesting different organs from them.
And a metaphor. Yeah.
I go, oh my word. I mean, what are we thinking about here? But,
yes.
That's
we do a version of that.
We do.
So character can't be fixed. I think we have to believe that because otherwise, what are we doing? Right. And then I think we have to understand that philosophy wasn't supposed to be riddles and abstractions, but the medium through which society developed its character. And by the way, this is also what the study of history was. And this is what literature was. It was all focused on what the ancients thought was the most important thing, which was the development of character in the next generation. And now, who knows what the philosophy professors are doing at insert university, and you read most literature and you're like, what is this? I don't really, it's all the anti-heroes. Even history seems to be so bogged down in facts and figures and not what can we learn from this about the good life and a good world.
I think we've made knowledge of history and philosophy as something pretentious.
Yes.
And I remember I went to the Navy War College when I was a mid-grade officer, and the lecturer got up. We were reading the Iliad as part of the course. And he says, well, if you haven't read it in the ancient Greek, it's just not the same. And, most of us just kind of rolled our eyes. They said, we're lucky you're getting us to read this
at all.
Cut down version. But I think when we make philosophy not approachable for the average person, and when somebody throws around the terms in a way that highlights their erudition and not yours, we push people away from it, when in reality, it should be eminently practical.
Yes.
That's what they were actually trying to do. This is the world you live in, and here's a way to think about it.
Yeah, and these weren't like these sort of tenured academics. I mean, Socrates fights in the Peloponnesian War, like a great power conflict.
Right.
And they ran for office. They played sports. They were not like eggheads. They were of the world, and they were trying to figure out how to have a good life in a bad world. I've been thinking about this recently, how we tend to romanticize the past. And again, Athens looks cool in the ruins and it looks cool in the pictures, but Socrates is living through Sparta and Athens and existential conflict. And then he lives through the 30 tyrants. And then he lives through, a death sentence. He doesn't live through, but it concludes with a death sentence. The Stoics lived through Nero, the fall of the Republic. Marcus Aurelius is emperor during a plague and a famine and a flood. It was just as scary as now. And they weren't just walking around in their togas eating olives and figs and stuff. It was stressful, and they thought, just like we do, that things were falling apart or things were moving too fast. And philosophy was supposed to help them deal with the practical problems of that existence.
And I think of the founding fathers. We tend to say now, they were 10 feet tall. What would they do? They were deeply flawed. And they realized that their fellow citizens were deeply flawed as well.
Yes.
And so they set up a system to account for that.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we shouldn't be intimidated by that. We should say, we are not founding fathers now.
Yeah.
But there has to be a term, because we now own where the nation is, and we're responsible.
Well, I was just working on this for a talk I'm going to give next week. The average age is like 40. Some were 20, but they were older than their years in the sense that they were steeped in these classical ideas. Washington is the only one who doesn't read the classical texts in Greek or Latin, but he did read them in English. And even I've been joking about this because Ron Chernow was here a couple weeks ago. The Hamilton of its day was this play called Cato that was all about classical virtue and discipline and courage and principle and country, and they all knew it by heart. They were sort of steeped in these ideas. When I learned about the founders, they talked about their sort of legal philosophical influences, which to me is secondary to the classical philosophy that influenced them as human beings, like Adams's line about how a country without virtue in the people will break through the Constitution like a whale through a net. They understood that they were setting up this legal system, but it was still incumbent on the individual to be a man or woman of character, and that you have to cultivate this. And that's the primary purpose of education, was to cultivate character in people.
I think that's an extraordinarily important point that I happen to feel that we don't do very well right now, because we don't have a body of, now they were elites, let's be honest, not every person, but we don't have a body of knowledge that is sort of entry-level requirement for being in the conversation. And because of that, we don't have a foundation where we can talk about things and refer to things through those ideas. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah. When they were signing the Federalist Papers with these pseudonyms, everyone understood which ancient figure they were alluding to when they called someone a Catiline or a Cato. Right. You were clear, were they a Republican or a usurper? There was just this sort of shared understanding of the good guys and bad guys, cautionary tales, exemplary examples. When Washington leaves after 2 terms, and when he resigned his commission before that, everyone understood this was a nod to Cincinnatus. And today, I mean, how many people could even know that Cincinnati is from Cincinnatus? But this is a myth that probably isn't true. Like, there probably was no Cincinnatus, or maybe it didn't happen that way. But that's secondary to the fact that for thousands of years, people were taught about the story of Cincinnatus as a model of someone who temporarily held power on behalf of the people and then was willing and disciplined enough to lay it down.
You know, you've just ruined my day. If Cincinnatus wasn't real.
Yeah, I don't think there's no verifiable proof he existed.
Yeah.
But I feel like history nerds out about, like, did Washington actually cut down a cherry tree or not? Yeah. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of the story.
That's true. You know, there was a book when I was a younger Army officer, it's still around, written in 1968 by Anton Myrer, called Once an Eagle. And it was read by most of the Army officers of my generation.
Yeah.
And because of that, it became something that you could refer to.
Yes.
Nowadays, we use lines from The Godfather, but from this book, there were these 2 characters, Sam Damon and Courtney Massengill. One was really a good guy and one was not a good guy. But I read the book about 7 times through my career. And when I was very young, it was binary. Sam Damon, Nebraska farm boy, enters the military as an enlisted man, wins the Medal of Honor, and he's thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. Yeah. And Courtney Massengill's an Ivy League conniver. But as you read it, as you get older and you are in a more complicated part of your career, you start to view the characters differently.
Yeah.
You don't like Courtney Massengill, but you start to get it.
Yes.
And you still love Sam Damon, but you see his limitations.
Yes.
But the most important thing is in the military, someone could refer to someone else and they say, he's a Courtney Massengill, and you immediately go, I got it.
Yeah. Yes.
And the same for Sam Damon. So I think having those common things we can analogize to are really important.
Well, just to have a text and evolve with it is a very powerful thing. I was going to write something about Gatsby. It's the 100-year anniversary of Gatsby this year. And that's a book, I read in high school, and you realize, they're teaching it so you know what the Jazz Age was, not as what it's supposed to be, this sort of, these different personalities, the effect of money on people. One of the scenes that I just reread it, and one of the scenes that strikes me the most is there's this part where Gatsby wants to get to Nick Carraway's cousin, who he's obviously in love with, and he says, hey, I had this like little business thing. Would you want to be involved in it? And he goes, no, I'm okay. Nick Carraway does, and he says, later I reflected on that as potentially being one of the great crises of my life. That he realized that Gatsby was trying to draw him into the criminal underworld, and he had just sort of shrugged it off, and he didn't realize just how narrowly the whole course of his life might have turned out very differently. And, you're going to miss that at 16. I missed it, ironically, in my 20s when I desperately needed to see that, when I was in my own potentially going down a road like that. And then, here in my late 30s, I go, oh, that's what this is. There's something about coming to a book over and over and over again that you're able to, once you get the basic facts, then you notice all these other layers that you didn't know were there.
Absolutely. It's like looking at the Spartans in the military, particularly after 9/11, we fell into another phase where we just were in love with the Spartans.
Yes.
But they were an awful lot like the pre-Civil War South.
Yes.
And they did things to the helots, or the slave population, that were unthinkable.
Yes.
And they did it routinely.
Yeah, we're fetishizing a military death cult.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
And, they did some heroic things, but you look just two-dimensionally at anything or anyone.
Yes.
And you draw away a certain view, and I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, the Stoics talk about how we never step in the same river twice. And so when you come back to these books, particularly, like, there's the experience of rereading a book you've already read and you see what you noted. And then like just reading Gatsby again, there's this annotated 100-year anniversary edition. So I'm reading it a fresh copy and I'm noticing different things because I'm not even able to see what I remembered before. It was actually funny. I wrote this book a couple years ago about Peter Thiel and this crazy thing he did. And I had been reading one of Eisenhower's memoirs at the same time. And then I remembered that Mayer Wolfsheim, the character in Great Gatsby, is the stand-in for the gangster Arnold Rothstein, who fixes the 1919 World Series. And did you know this?
No.
Okay, so did you know the 1919 World Series was fixed?
I probably know more about that than I knew about Gatsby.
Well, so there's a character in Gatsby that's supposed to be that.
Yeah.
And I was reading in Eisenhower's memoirs where he was listening to the radio when the news broke that it had been fixed. And he's talking about how that always stayed with him, that events, like he'd remembered watching it on I guess probably listening to it or whatever. Yeah. And then, later it breaks that it had been fixed. And he goes, things are not always what they seem. There's always things beneath the table. And this shaped his understanding of power and news, et cetera. So I go back and because I'm writing a book about a conspiracy, I'm going to go read that section in Gatsby. And in that section in Gatsby, Nick Carraway is introduced by Gatsby to Mayer Wolfsheim, who is Arnold Rothstein. Mm-hmm. And Gatsby goes, this is, Mayer Wolfsheim, he fixed the 1919 World Series. Carraway goes, I knew that it was fixed, but the idea that it had been a person who had done it, that one person had affected the lives of millions of people. He's like, I thought it happened as, like he says, like the result of an inevitable chain, not that an individual could change the course of history. And so anyways, of course I missed that the first 5 times I read the book, but it's not until I'm writing about something and then reading something else, and then you suddenly make these connections. And so it's not enough to just read some of these texts, the Odyssey, whatever, once. You have to have this kind of lifelong engagement with it, which I'm sure was easier in the ancient world when there were a lot fewer books.
But I wish we had a culture where we talked about books more, because I can read a book and I probably get 40% of the real message. Yes. But if I'm in a group with somebody who then describes, like Gatsby, I read Gatsby back in school, but you just told me some things I had no idea.
Yeah.
But if I'd been in a group where somebody said, oh yeah, this.
Yes.
I wouldn't have probably admitted it to the group. Sure. But I would have said, oh, for sure. But trying to get as much as you can out of something as complicated as a good book. Yes. Is important.
Yes. And sometimes you just can't know what you didn't know until you know it. Obviously I've had this 20-year relationship. I guess it would have been 15-year relationship with Marcus Aurelius' Meditations since I read it in college. And then it's not until we're in the middle of the pandemic that I go, oh, wait, he wrote this during a plague. This is a plague book. And he's not being metaphorical here. He's being literal. He's literally talking about the way that this screws with our minds when there's this thing out in the air killing people, and the stress and strain it puts on society and relationships, and how exhausted we get. And you go, oh, unless I'd been alive in 1919 and experienced that pandemic, I couldn't have ever gotten this until we're here. And so it's critical that you not just read, but then you go out and experience, because that informs the reading, and it's this sort of endless feedback loop of reading, experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about something, what is it, like the tale of the dinosaur?
The dinosaur's tale, right?
Yes. What is that?
Yeah, and I used a story, a real one, where I was commanding a battalion of Rangers, and we were told that the Chief of Staff of the Army was visiting, which is the head of the Army, really important person coming out. Yeah. And because we do a preparation for a big demonstration, we're going to really wow him. We didn't want to do it, but once you're prepared, you want to go on and show him what you got. It's a Friday afternoon, and about noon, we get this call that says, well, the chief's schedule got too busy. We canceled the afternoon, so we canceled this. Yeah. And so had to go to the troops and tell them, all right, you've done all this stuff. You've rehearsed. We were all ready. It's canceled. It's something more important. And everybody was disappointed. Yeah. Now, if you'd canceled it on Monday, they'd have said, great, we avoided it. Yes. But after you've done all the work. And what it really came down to is you get very senior, very important. You've got handlers around you. And if you're the senior person and the schedule starts to get full, I go, we got a problem here, Ryan. We got to cut some stuff. and you go, is that any problem? And
it's not a problem for you.
I go, no, sir, no problem.
Yeah.
And you are like a dinosaur where you've gotten huge, your tail's big, your brain didn't get any bigger, and you turned and your tail knocked stuff over. And it happens all the time. And unintentionally, the decisions or non-decisions of very important people affect incredible numbers of people. And it's still your fault. If you're the senior person, even if the schedule got full, and there wasn't another option, it is your fault.
Yes.
Now, that means that whenever possible, you should be informed of it. You should ask probing questions. Now, wait a minute, what do we cancel? What's the effect on people and that sort of thing? And understand that you're doing damage that you probably need to repair.
And no one's ever going to come to your face and go, sir, that was rude, or sir, so-and-so missed his daughter's recital for no reason as a result of what you did. You're first off not aware of the impact you're having on people. You're also not aware of the emotions or the resentments that it's generating. And there's going to be consequences for that at some point too, I'm sure.
Some are huge, just like being late to a meeting.
Yes.
It's a sign of power on the part of some people. They automatically show up late, so everybody is convened and waiting. And then they breeze in and they go, sorry, I'm late.
Yeah.
They didn't have to be late.
Yes.
I mean, occasionally things are going to happen, but the reality is it's a sign of arrogance.
Yeah.
And it builds up this scar tissue. It builds up resentment over time. And leaders need to understand they're doing that.
Yeah. There's a story about Antoninus, who's Marcus Aurelius' successor, and obviously the Roman Empire is enormous, and they would have to tour the different provinces. They'd go see this people. They'd inspect the troops over here, and it's also, I'm sure, a very pleasurable endeavor for the emperor. He's feted at parties, and they're bringing him the best this and the best that, and Antoninus does almost none of this. And we're told that he doesn't do it because he understands how expensive and how exhausting it is to host the emperor. And I just think of the empathy to go like, I would like to do this, but I wouldn't like to do it for the outlay that it has on other people. It's not worth it. And I think sometimes as a leader or as a person who's used to getting what you want, you just think about whether it's good for you, and you're not thinking about what it means for it to be good for you, what it takes out of other people for you to get what you so willingly accept or appreciate.
When I was still on active duty, there was a brigadier general in the Army who was in recruiting command. And so he would go around the United States to visit recruiting locations. And his aide-de-camp wrote a letter that was sent out to all the different subordinate units so they could always be prepared for his visits. Yeah. And of course, it ended up going viral because I remember something. It says that the general is a big man, so you need to get a minivan and take out the bucket seats so he's got room. And then it said he wants a Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi in there in a bottle, not a can. And then it goes, can tastes funny. And then it says, I remember this line, if there are chocolate chip cookies, they will be consumed. and I remember seeing this thing and I meant, oh my God. One, who's going to provide the chocolate chip cookies? Yes. Who's paying for that? It's not the Army.
Sure.
And if the general knew about it, hopefully he went ballistic.
Right. He might have one time said, I like chocolate chip cookies.
Right.
And he doesn't know that down the line, this has come down as the word of God.
But this happens.
Yes.
And whose reputation was really impacted was not this aide, this overeager aide. It's the person themselves.
Well, it's not even them. It's also just, this is now the frustration with leadership generally, or the public and what you're a representative of.
Exactly.
There's a story about Cato. So Cato's the Roman senator, well known, later a general. He's traveling, I think maybe for personal reasons, he's traveling through the empire, and he would often travel ahead of his baggage train. He gets to the city one day, and usually, they know he's coming, and so there's the whole rigmarole. And he gets there, and no one's there to greet him, and he just sits down and waits for the people to arrive. And then when they get there, oh my gosh, we're so sorry, it's a whole thing. And he says, I don't care. He's like, you should just be aware that not all your guests will be Catos. And the point is, you want to be chill, and on the other hand, you want to understand that everyone's not always going to be so understanding. The reason Kobe Bryant played for the Lakers and not the Nets is that as he was touring the different teams, before he gets drafted. The Nets had to send him back to LA or something. He visited the Nets. They booked his travel. They put him on a middle seat in economy on the way home. And he was like, no, never these. So you never know. Like, you want to assume everyone's chill and humble about these things, and they're not going to be. I think about the contrast of those two stories.
You know, that's fascinating. And you hope you're not the kind of person who needs or demands that.
Yeah.
I kind of think we have gone too far in our country towards a regal treatment
Sure.
of the president.
Yeah.
You know, I actually think we ought to get rid of Hail to the Chief. I think that was not the idea when we formed the country, that we were going to, I don't think we need over-the-top accommodations or airplanes and things like that. And because I think it actually sends a bad message internally and externally when we go too far with that. And that's true of some corporate CEOs and other leaders as well.
There's something about the British system where there's a separation between the embodiment of the state and then the actual person running. I don't think they did it on purpose, but that's probably healthier, right? Yeah. Because the person doing the job is wearing the suit and is much more a government employee, and the other person is the symbol. And in the US, uniquely, those things are merged. Actually, that's a problem. It's like, no, the pomp and circumstance should be in the legislative body, which is the representative of the people, and then the executive is the executor of that thing. We've got it. We have a misperception of what the president's job is and what they are supposed to represent. I think that's the problem.
I've never thought of it that way, but I really like that. You know, I got to go into number 10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
And it's very modest in there.
Yeah.
It's not very nice, and where the prime minister works and lives is pretty limited, but it keeps a real realism.
Yeah.
What am I doing here?
It's also weird, like the vice president is sort of the president's emissary in the ceremonies or whatever, but there is something about you're puffing this person up in a way that is probably not healthy. But you do need that. Who greets the team when they win the Super Bowl? Who pins the medals on people? That is part of the role of a state. You don't make the CEO of a company do a lot of those things.
Why don't we create a separate thing, not royalty, but elect somebody with those skills and that interest?
Yes.
And they could be that, and we could give them a 10-year term so that they don't have to change too much.
Well, that goes to your point about the founding fathers, which is, I think we have, as smart as they are and as impressive as the system they created is, we have lost the ability to tweak or improve the system. You know, I mean, the idea of amending the Constitution is effectively inconceivable, you know, and if not impossible. It's probably impossible because it's inconceivable. But they were tweaking it, I mean, not that long ago. The last constitutional amendment is not some lofty thing. It's like that Congress can't give themselves a pay raise.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it was designed to be updated.
Yes.
That was the whole idea of it.
They updated it right after they wrote it the first time. Like
Exactly.
immediately after. They were like, we missed all the important stuff.
And we also think that the founding fathers, what their intent was, is sacrosanct.
Yes.
Well, it is what their intent was back 250 years ago.
Sure.
Their intent might be different now.
Yeah, they didn't know some stuff. I mean, people do that with the Stoics too. It's like, it was 2,000 years ago. They didn't know about a lot of things. Like, I would be disappointed if they were not on the same page as us about a lot of stuff that we have subsequently discovered and learned. That would be the whole point about it. So is you just become closed off to new ideas once you get to a certain age? That's a shame.
I'm 70. Yeah, that's what you do. No, I'm kidding. You can't do that because just too much comes, and it's too interesting.
Well, your point about commanding like it's your last job. Yeah. I think that's another thing we get very wrong with what is the point of a 6-year term if actually all you're thinking about is another 6-year term, another 6-year term? If every job is for life, if your main thing is to keep doing the thing, you're never going to make the hard leadership decisions that need to be made, that they designed they designed for you to make and they entrusted you to make, because you're always delaying to the future.
Yeah. In the Army, there is an eye of the needle from colonel to brigadier general. About 2,400 colonels were looked at every year, and 40 were selected for brigadier general. So that's the most rigorous cut. And what they found was, or what my experience was, when a person was selected for brigadier general, they became more conservative in their actions, less risk-taking, because they were close enough. They were in the in crowd. They had stars.
Yes.
They could see even more stars possible, and they start to play carefully.
Yes.
They don't want to lose as opposed to win. And you saw it in staff actions in the Pentagon. You saw it in the way they interacted with senior leaders. And yet in many cases, we promoted them because they were risk takers and iconoclastic. But it's like we cut the offending knots off the piece of wood so that it wouldn't rub anything wrong way.
If the point of education is sort of moral education, there's certain examples that you want to explain so you get a lesson as a leader. Like, I think one thing that every school child should learn is right after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson is thinking about what his presidency is going to be about. And he says, we're going to pass the civil rights bill. And his staff says, I think we should wait until after re-election. We should wait till later in the term. And he looks at him, and this is a dyed-in-the-wool Southerner who has been resistant to civil rights, who has played the game as long and as craftily as you could play the game to get powerful in the South. He says, oh, what the hell is the presidency for? Right? He's like, I'm now president. I'm going to do the thing that needs to be done. I'm not going to delay it till the future. I think that's a powerful story. Apparently, when Jimmy Carter was president, they said the one thing you could do to piss off Jimmy Carter was to say, let's wait till the second term, which, by the way, turned out to be a pretty good read on his part because he didn't get a second term, And so the idea of like, no, I'm going to do it later. I'm going to do it when I'm older. I'm going to do it when I'm more secure. I'm going to do it after I retire. I'm going to do it when the kids are out of school. I'm going to do it when the market's better. No, you won't. If you're not going to do it now, you're probably never going to do it.
And this gets to the life decision that I saw a lot of my students from Yale and whatnot. And while they were at school, I'd ask them what they were going to do, and they'd give me one description. And then when they graduated, they went into investment banking or something.
Because they have to make the money first to then be the supposedly good person they want to be.
I can't save society until I have enough money to be able to do that. And I can't say that's wrong, but I can say most people who get out and make a bunch of money don't end up saving society.
Yes.
So you would be different than the average.
Yeah. It's insidious logic. It's like, look, you might, I'm gonna clean this up in the morning.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
But probably not, because you've already said it can be delayed.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, like people are mad that Tim Cook isn't this like revolutionary, creative visionary. And it's like, how do you think he worked for Steve Jobs for so long? Like those two, they wouldn't have got along. He is a very specific type of leader, and that's how he made his way quietly up through the ranks. And that's why he's been really good at what he did, which is preserving and iterating on the legacy, but he's not going to invent the Apple car. That's not what he cultivated. I think the problem is people tell themselves, oh, I'm going to go along, I'm going to play my role, I'm going to make my way up the ranks, or I'm going to accumulate this thing, and then I'll be this transgressive, rule-breaking iconoclast, and you just spent 2 decades proving that that's not who you are.
Yeah. I used to describe in the military where we would have promotion boards that basically weren't very sympathetic to real iconoclasts. And so then you get to a certain rank and you got this group of people, and they may be men, women, minorities, etc. But the common DNA is they're Army officers who made it through a system. So they have much more that makes them homogenized, the same. And we can't expect something dramatically different from what we bred for.
Yes. Although you would hope that there would be some sort of core character that when push comes to shove overrides the incentives, overrides the habits and the practices. And
there's always a minority that emerges, and you didn't always see that coming.
Yes.
Someone who immediately is very different from what you might have categorized them once they've got the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, someone was telling me that the commandant of the Naval Academy, for instance, that is supposed to be a dead-end job. Like you're not going to get to the next rank, and they select that person so they'll have a certain amount of academic and career independence. And yet, even so, nobody likes to get in trouble. Nobody likes to lose their job. And so this, I think, ultimately is where the character, you have to be reminding yourself over and over and over again, hey, this is the end of the road for me, so let's act like it.
That's right. If I'm not going to do it now, when am I going to do it?
Yes. Yeah, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? The famous question. Yeah, I happen to know a senator who voted for impeachment after January 6th, and he had just been reelected. And I remember I sent him an email and I said, thank you for actually acting like you have 6 years of guaranteed job security. And he was like, that's what it's for. And we seem to forget that, yeah, the tenure is there for a reason. The pension is there for a reason. The term limit, all that stuff is there to counteract the very real and human tendency to take the easy path, to steer out of trouble, to delay and defer for some future moment when, things are really important now. It's like, no, it's a very seductive thing to say, I need to maintain my access. That's my primary obligation here. So in the future, I can use that access. Yeah. And I guess, where would we be if Mike Pence had resigned a year earlier, not in a good spot? And yet I'd argue most of us are not Mike Pence on January 6th.
And most of us wouldn't get that particular moment where you even had the opportunity.
Yes.
He spent an awful lot of time doing exactly what was desired of him that I don't think was helpful.
No, certainly not.
So in the key moment, he did. I find it interesting that people in business, particularly CEOs, nowadays they negotiate these financial packages where they are essentially have tenure.
Yes.
Meaning economically, they're going to be fine no matter what happens.
Yes, they have a huge golden parachute, whether it works or not.
But they don't take advantage of that to voice their opinions if they have them. Now, some will argue that they don't want to hurt the company, and there's some truth to that. I also think the effect of social media is even bigger, because I think one of the things we fear more than just being fired is being dogpiled by people who have nothing to lose, that either regular media or social media can make our lives painful.
Well, look, the statistics show that coaches should go for it on fourth down more often than they do. So why don't they? Right. It's because they don't like the press conference afterwards when it doesn't go well. And when, by the way, the public doesn't understand that statistically they made the right choice. It's hard to go, hey, the stats show that, I should take this flyer on this down because some small percentage of the time it works, and the game was already lost, so it was all upside. That's not a thing the public can understand, and that's a thing that the media sometimes deliberately ignores, because the more salacious story is so-and-so blew it. But it is funny that you have someone getting paid millions of dollars who wants to win more than anything, but the one thing they don't want to win more than is the risk of seeming stupid.
Yeah. And I wonder what AI will do with that.
Oh.
Because as AI starts to give an opinion that factors in all the historical data and says, actually, you ought to go for it on fourth down, how will that affect the conversation about it after the fact?
Yeah.
One, will the coaches automatically defer to it and say, well, I followed AI, so I was doing the right thing? Or will the analysts come back and be smarter than now and go, well, AI said you shouldn't have done it?
Or is the black and whiteness of, hey, it's not my decision, I deferred to the thing. Right. Does that work? That's going to be tricky. But it is interesting that at the end of the day, the perception is more important to us than the reality. And that's where like a little bit of courage and confidence comes in. And also, it's like, what are you actually worried about?
Right.
It's not that you're not getting shot at.
That's right.
It just feels that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, like how many people in Washington are afraid to... I've been amazed at what they'll do to be reelected when you privately talk to them and they tell you how much they hate their job. So it's like you're debasing yourself to maintain a thing that you actually don't like. The fact that it's not so fun should actually free you up to make the right decision here because you could take it or leave it. But it turns out you actually can't leave it. You can't walk away.
And that is so common. I just sent a copy of On Character to a sitting senator who I'm very disappointed in.
Yeah.
And I didn't poke him with it. I just sent him a note and said, here's my thinking on it.
Yeah.
Because I think we need to be willing, as we say, to make decisions like we're in our last job.
Yes.
To be willing to lose something, because even if you lose it in reality, sometimes it's better to walk away with your pride, your dignity, be able to look yourself in the mirror and said, I did what I thought was right.
Yes. Yeah. And by the way, look at most of the people that have done that. They're not living under a bridge somewhere.
Right.
It worked out pretty good for them.
Yeah.
In fact, they might be better off. But yeah, I think this is something the founders had trouble. They talked a lot about ambition. They talked a lot about avarice. They failed to account for the decline in our value of honor, reputation, being seen as a person of character. Like we've somehow lost that norm where I would rather lose this thing or even lose my life than be humiliated or be shown as a hypocrite or be shown to be without character. That was the greatest sin. And so there was this kind of final check. And when that goes away, you're in real sketchy territory.
There were always things going on which weren't admirable, but the reality is I think there was a peer pressure that made you operate to a higher plane than you would have otherwise.
Yes.
And it constantly pulled you up. We don't do that because professionals don't do that.
Yes.
Or gentlemen don't do that, or whatever thing we do. And I think we've allowed that to weaken. We've said whatever it takes to get what you want right now is the right course of action.
Yes. Does it make you successful or not? If it makes you successful, then you have been vindicated.
That's right.
This is why unions are important. This is why press clubs were important. The sort of societies or guilds or organizations that allowed there to sort of emerge an ideal kind of character code of conduct. I think the military has held up fairly well under the stresses of the last couple of years. The legal profession has held up pretty well. The medical profession has held up pretty well. And one of the things all these domains have in common is sort of boards or licensing or kind of a community that acts as a not legal enforcer, although sometimes it does, but primarily a cultural enforcer of values. And you don't want to be kicked out of the community.
That's right. Formally or informally.
Yes.
I also have been thinking about Father's Day recently.
Yeah.
And I know you're a father, and I still am, now grandfather. And, we think about someone is a good father.
Yeah.
But we also sometimes simultaneously think they can be a despicable person. Think of Vito Corleone. He's a murderer and a thief, and yet around his kids, he's a caring father. I don't believe in that dichotomy.
Yeah.
I think that you are a single character. You may have you try to depict something different.
Yeah.
And so when I think of Father's Day, I don't think anybody should be celebrated, even if they're a doting father or grandfather, if they're a dirtbag.
Yes.
And we know it.
Yes.
There shouldn't be Father's Day cards or greetings given to somebody who is just not a worthy person.
Yeah, you can't say, I do this all for my kids as you fuck up the world that they're supposed to live in. And by the way, that their kids are supposed to live in and their friends are supposed to live in. We do love that image of like the murderous mobster who his one weak spot is that he loves his kids or whatever.
Right.
And I think we fetishize people who just care about their kids.
Yes.
Right? Not like that the generation of kids, like with this sort of like the term, what's his name? Richard Reeves has this term, dream hoarders. Where it's like you're only fighting for your kids' opportunities and you see it as this kind of zero-sum world. I think we've also kind of celebrated that version of parenting, which is, I think, not just destructive for those kids, but destructive for all of society, which we have an obligation to serve as well.
And I would argue it doesn't even work as intended, because you can have a child or grandchildren and you can build up tremendous wealth for them. But if they know you're a robber baron, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to emulate that behavior because that's what they learned watching, or they're going to reject it.
Yes.
In which case, you didn't get what you wanted.
Yeah. One of my favorite chapters in the book is just titled, "What Are Children For?" Which is such an interesting question. What are children for?
I have days when I question that. I just had one son, my wife and I, and he lives next door to us. And he was quite a character in his youth, but now he works in the government. And we got these 3 granddaughters who I see every day.
Yeah.
And they're just amazing. But you say, well, what are we doing here? They didn't have to have we didn't have to have a child. They didn't have to have kids. And you say, well, why am I having them?
Yeah.
And so the first question is, well, I need heirs to the family fortune.
Sure.
Well, there wasn't a family fortune, so that's not a problem.
Yeah.
I need people to work on the farm. Well, we don't have a farm.
Sure.
We're in the store. So none of those things apply. So now it comes down to we had them just because we choose to have them.
Yeah.
In which case we invited guests to the party and they didn't ask to be invited.
Yeah.
So what we now owe them is what we can do for them that's responsible. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there are things, particularly as a grandparent, you don't do.
Yeah.
You're not the parent anymore. You don't tell them how to run things. You have certain obligations and capabilities based upon what's required. But we need to stop back and think. Now, on a grand scale, if we don't have kids, there's no future.
Yeah.
On a local scale, it's not to perpetuate our legacy because, as Marcus Aurelius points out,
we're not around to enjoy it.
That's right. There's no point.
And his familial legacy is not so great.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And so you do it just because you should.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, true of so many things.
I have 2 young boys. You make it sound in the book like your son was quite a handful. Certainly maybe challenged a button-down military officer. But you said you guys never argued. What's the secret?
Well, yeah, it was funny because we just had the one son, and it was sort of like a threesome. My wife, my son, and I. He would refer to us. He'd say, "Hey, guys, what are we doing tonight?" Which was different. I'd grown up as one of 6, and so had my wife. So it was parents and then kids.
Yeah.
But this was like a threesome. And my son was, he was a good kid, always good values, never got in trouble with drugs or anything. But he got into punk rock. Yeah. And he started this long hair phase, and then he cut it off and dyed it blonde. Both looked terrible. And then he went to a mohawk, and he kept changing color of that thing. But I used to joke with him about it. Like when he had long hair, I said, "I'll give you $1,000 to cut it off." And he laughed at me, wouldn't. And then he decided to cut it off himself. And he came to me and says, "Now I want the collect." I said, "No." But the whole idea was, why argue about that stuff?
Yes.
Why argue about his hair, or whether he liked different music than me, or whether he wanted to go in the Army or not? Why not maintain a relationship, try to be as close to him as I can be, and be whatever example I'm capable of being? And it worked really well.
Yeah.
Because he turned out to be frighteningly like me in many ways. My wife rolls her eyes because he's very disciplined. He's very stoic, which you'd love. He's sort of taciturn, but he's very professional. He works for the government, and he is absolutely focused on loyalty and committing to his duty and that sort of thing. And so he had 7 years as a punk rocker. That's his adventure.
Yeah, and a small fraction of a life in retrospect. Yeah, I think about the things that I argued with my parents about as a kid, and, you know, how silly they seem in retrospect. And I remember thinking, as I was admonishing my kids for spilling food in the back of the car, it occurred to me how many times my parents did that. And then I just thought, wait, where's that car now? That's in a fucking junkyard somewhere. Right. You know, the wall that I colored on, they painted over before they sold the house because they had to anyway. You know, just all the things that you feel like they matter. And actually all you're leaving, you talked about scar tissue, all you're actually leaving is a residue of scar tissue, like Dad and I don't get along. My parents don't like me. We fight all the time. And by the time they're older, you're not going to care about any of this stuff, but the kids still will, because all they remember is the fighting and the arguing and the criticism. I got in a car a couple months ago in San Diego, and I had like a Metallica shirt on or something. The driver said, "Oh, you're wearing a Metallica shirt." And I said, "Yeah, are you a fan?" And he said, "Kinda, not really." I said, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "My son was really into heavy metal." And he's like, "So I decided to get into heavy metal." And then he starts telling me for the whole drive, it was San Diego, so not far to the airport, but the whole drive, he's telling me about all these concerts they went to and that they still go to now that he's an adult. And I got the sense that he didn't really like it, but he'd willed himself into liking it. And I just thought how delightful and amazing it was, and how sadly that was the exception to the rule. Like how many other, like especially something like heavy metal or punk rock or tattoos or, goth or whatever the things where the overwhelming parental reaction is to be threatened by, and for it to be a source of conflict and disagreement, instead of just deciding, this is the ride we're going on. I hope it's not long, but this is the ride we're going on.
I used to tell my son that, I'm going to laugh at him someday about the different hairstyles. And I have used pictures of it in speeches later. Yeah. I said, "Hey, look at this." But
I'm sure your grandkids think it's hilarious.
They do.
Yes.
They kind of roll their eyes. It's sort of funny. Speaking of a lot of kids and spilling food in the car, I was having a beer years ago when I was young with a older captain in the Army, but he was a really wise guy and he was funny too. And he was talking about how many times you lean over the seat and you go, "I'm going to come back and kill one of you guys if you do that." He says, "Just once you need to kill one." He says, "Just one, and then you'll have them forever."
Yes.
I remember that. I go, okay. Yeah.
You're preserving a thing that, by the way, is falling apart and doesn't, the car lost the value when you drove it off the lot. Exactly. But you're deciding that your kids are the ones that are damaging the resale value. The priceless thing, the thing that at some point you would give anything for it to be better, for it to last longer, that's the place you've decided to hold the line.
Yeah.
And then the tragedy of this is it's so easy to say this, and then I'm like, bro, you can't take the lid off a milkshake in the car. Like, what were it's still like it. And then it's like, I guess I gave you the milkshake, but I only gave you the milkshake because you were yelling, and I wanted. but like it, and then it is so hard to actually do it.
And it's a funny situation I'm in because my son's character is better than mine.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I see it, and he doesn't do anything to put it in my face, but just in small ways.
Yeah.
He's just more disciplined, more focused about values. He spent the 7 years he was in punk rock, he also delivered pizza.
Yeah.
And so he is very connected to people who do jobs like pizza delivery and tipping and things like that. He's just reflexively thoughtful and empathetic in that way, better than I am.
Yeah.
I hope I am. I wish I am. I write about it. But he lives it in a way that is just automatic. And I just admire that so much. We never talk about it.
Yeah.
But I feel fortunate about that.
Do you think he knows that you admire that in him?
I actually don't. I don't think, because I just don't communicate that very well about that.
I've heard this story so many times from different people where, they were somewhat estranged from their father. They felt like their father didn't approve. They felt like their father didn't support them. And then they go, then he died, and I found a file in his desk of every newspaper clipping from everything. And I just go, You're presenting that as a beautiful story. And to me, it is a terribly sad and screwed up story. Like they knew the thing, they believed the thing, and then they just, out of pride or fear or propriety or whatever it is, could not bring themselves to say what should be the most natural and easy thing to say.
Because if you think about it, if you just suddenly go to someone, "I'm proud of you," it can sound sort of meaningless or superficial. But in reality, you look at him and says, "I really admire the person you are."
Yeah.
And I sort of try.
Who doesn't want to hear that?
Yeah. Well, I kind of hope that part of that comes through in the book.
It does. I try to catch my kids, they're walking up the stairs, they're walking by, you're in the room, and, hey, And oh, am I going to get in trouble? And then I just try to catch them with I love you, proud of you, you're doing amazing. I'm trying, like, I heard once that you can tell what kind of presence you have in your kid's life by their reaction when they hear the garage door open. Like oh shit, that's what you don't want that, right? Even if they're not doing what they're supposed to be, they should not be scared that mom or dad is home.
Yeah.
That's a bad vibe.
I have to process that a second, because I think my 3 granddaughters aren't scared when I walk in a room at all.
Right.
Nor are they impressed. Of course. There's Granddaddy.
It does. Your affection for your family does come through in the book, and the sort of compound that you've set up strikes me as a very beautiful thing. I heard the founder of FedEx one time in an interview. Someone was asking him what it's like to be a billionaire or something, and he said, you know what being rich is? He says, it's not having a plane, it's not having a bunch of houses, it's not your bank account. Being rich is your kids come home for Christmas. And I've repeated that once, and someone in the comments says, actually, why are you making them come to you? And I was like, that's actually another layer on it too. Riches, your kids willingly spend time with you. People go, you only get 18 summers with your kids. And it's like, legally, but then you meet families and you're like, whoa, you guys...
That's right.
You like each other. You voluntarily do this. And the fact that your son could live anywhere, but instead he lives next to you, and you could be having arguments about why you never get to see your grandkids, and instead they're just there. That's got to be I'm sure you have met many more powerful people, many more successful people, many people who had more illustrious military careers, but it's they're sitting alone in a lazy boy chair wondering.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've got my daughter-in-law is a COO in my company.
Yeah.
She was our first employee, and she and I are incredibly close, as
That's
you can
beautiful.
imagine, after 15 years of that. The 3 granddaughters are next door. The son. I mean, you're exactly right. People say you're living the dream, and I am.
Yeah.
But we helped construct the dream. My wife
Sure.
and I did what we could to maneuver the pieces in place.
Well, people say that with the bookstore. We live on a ranch. They go, I've always wanted to do that. And I go, it wasn't like a test I had to pass. My ranch cost what my studio apartment in New York City was renting for.
Right.
You can make decisions. You don't. I'm sure. I called it a compound. I'm sure it's relatively modest by anyone's conception of what that means. If that's what's important to you, you can figure it out.
Exactly.
You're waiting around for it to magically happen, but you said you construct the dream. You have to make it real.
And the beauty is you've done it early enough in your life, at your age. You can shift it if you want later, but you also have years to enjoy it, and years for your boys to enjoy it.
Yes, hopefully. Or we'll find out it was a nightmare. They hated it. And
they'll write tell-all books about it someday.
Well, it's funny. I listened to this young actress talking about her childhood. Her mother was an actress. And, she was saying that she hated it. Like her mother had described, we traveled to all these places and she got to meet all these people. And the daughter was saying, I would get these friends for 6 months and then I would lose them. And I felt, I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like I had any stability. She's like, people say I'm a Nepo baby. I had a rough childhood. My needs were provided for, but it wasn't what I needed. And I thought it was interesting when they asked the mother about it, and the mother goes, "What is she talking about?" She again describes it as this idyllic thing, and it is hard to realize your kids aren't wrong about their feelings or experiences, even if your intentions were right, even if it was better than most, even if it was better than your own. If they didn't like it, they didn't like it. That's if it wasn't for them, it wasn't for them.
No, I think that's true. At the same time, as an old guy, I'll say if you're getting 3 hots in a cot,
it's better than, sure.
It's
sure.
relative.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes particularly in our society today, we have this victimization thing.
Yeah.
Feel sorry for me. I didn't get 3 scoops of ice cream, only 2.
Yeah. Our definition of trauma is so expansive as to essentially exempt no one, which means we all feel traumatized all the time,
right?
Which probably isn't ideal either.
I don't think most of the Stoics would have signed on to that.
No, I don't. You know what I've always thought, I wrote a note about this in the book, but I've always thought is interesting about you because we live in this, or I guess today we sometimes call it cancel culture. But we have these figures where something happened to them, they got fired, they screwed up, there was a scandal, whatever. It's this breaking point in their public persona, their life, where the resulting person is bitter or angry or aggrieved or becomes a reactionary or switches political parties. It just sends them on this trajectory that they wouldn't have been on otherwise. And I find it very impressive, and we don't need to get into the specifics of it for you, but I am curious about how you handled that closing of your career. One of the things the Stoics talk about is they say it can only harm you if it harms your character, right? That basically you can lose the job, you can lose your career, you can lose all your money, all these things can happen to you. But the harm is if it turns you into something that you're not. And I feel like you just went in a different direction than so many people in that position.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I in no way compare myself to James Stockdale.
Yes.
But if I think about his experience where he lost control over everything about his physical well-being and in short term, almost everything, he chose not to let that re-identify him, change who he was.
Yes.
In fact, I would argue it strengthened and it expanded him. And I think I was lucky enough when I resigned from the military after 34 plus years, and I suddenly had my previous identity challenged, had a couple of options. I could become an embittered former general, and you'd have me on your show to tell that story about how I got screwed.
Could be in Steve Bannon's war room right now.
Exactly. And instead made the decision with the help of my wife, Annie, not to do that.
Yeah.
Instead to say, okay, I am not a bad person, and so I'm going to be as good a person as I can be going forward. And that became really liberating.
Yeah.
And the thing that was important to remember is you don't do away with the injury. You can't pretend it didn't happen. It did happen.
Yeah.
And to the degree I was agent of it, I have responsibility, and I don't dodge that. But on the other hand, if I say there is redemption, I can move forward, I can be as much as I'm capable of being going forward, that's what I'll do. And that's been the luckiest point in my life, because I never, to that point in my life, I'd had pretty much unbroken success. There's some hard things, but, generally. Yeah. And if I think about it, I came out of those years of war, I had lost no limbs. I wasn't killed. I wasn't, in other ways damaged. So I don't have much to complain about.
Right.
And then I have opportunities, and I have the opportunity to be whatever I will myself to be.
Yeah.
And that's the direction I've taken. And, it's limited by my talents and whatnot. But I'm so happy I did that. That has been the gift of life. And this sounds terrible, but I was 55, almost 56 when I resigned suddenly from the military. And in some ways it was a gift because I was still young enough to have runway to really do something else.
Yes, yes.
And so I've been able to do that. Had it been 5 or 6 years later, it would have been harder. Yeah.
Stockdale said, I'm going to, if I survive, I'm going to turn this into the best thing that ever happened to me. I talked to someone in here, he was a grief expert. His name is David Kessler. He lost his son. And, I can only imagine what it's like to lose a teenage son. And at some point he was sitting there, he said, and he decided, people are going to look at who I am in a few years from now. Are they going to go, he was never the same after the loss of his son and it ruined his life? Or are they going to say after the loss of his son, these are the things he went on to do. This was the positive impact that this tragic event happened to him meant. And I think that's what, when the Stoics say the obstacle is the way, that's what they mean. They're not that you suddenly made a bunch of money. It's not always that it was great for you. It's that you went in a different direction as a result of what happened, and that was subsequently positive in some way. It's that you didn't take a bad situation and turn it into a a worse situation, which is what so many of us do. Like the thing that can happen to you, it could be totally your fault, could be a cancer diagnosis, it could be an unjust, unfair thing, a wrongful conviction or whatever, but then we still decide what it's going to mean if we get to keep going, if we don't die from it, then we get to decide what it means for us.
And I think that applies to our country right now.
Sure.
I think we have agency.
Yeah.
We get to decide, we get to vote, we get to do different things that can make a difference one way or another. And if we don't take that responsibility, if we all kind of sit on the sideline and go, I hope it doesn't go badly.
Yes.
We're going to get whatever happens.
Yes. We keep acting like there's, when Adam Kinzinger was here, he said, my fellow congressmen seem to think there's a super Congress.
Right.
Although I guess you could argue that's what the Senate is, but the Senate seems to think there's a super Senate. And the Supreme Court seems to think there's a super Supreme Court. And that at some point it isn't your job to say, hey, with the decision I get to make here, I'm going to make the hard, right decision, even though people are going to criticize me for it, even though it might cost me something, even though I might get stuck with something.
It's funny that Adam said that, because when I finally got senior enough where you end into some meetings in the Oval Office, not often, but you're there, and you suddenly realize this is it.
Yeah.
These are the knuckleheads who are going to make the big decision, and I'm one of them now.
Yeah.
And they actually listen to me, and you get frightened because you go, this is it? This is the group who's going to decide big things. And if you're the right kind of person, then what I think it does is it increases your sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
And decreases the pettiness. If you're not, of course, it doesn't have that effect. But that's where I think we need to think now. That great line that says, there's no one coming.
Yeah.
It's up to us.
Yes. Well, I got an email this morning. I would be curious how you would answer this person. I got an email this morning from someone in the National Guard. They'd served many years. Now they're in the National Guard. And he goes, look, I think immigration laws should be enforced. I think we're a nation of laws. But I also don't think, tanks should be running through the streets of American cities for spurious reasons, especially if the governor of said state has not requested that. What do you think I should do? And it obviously philosophically, it's what it's easy to be glib and black and white about these things because you're not the one who's having to make that decision. But what have you learned about those sort of hard decisions, and what would you might say to someone facing a specific one like that?
Those are much harder than they seem from afar, because for the military, lawful orders should be obeyed. And if the military doesn't obey lawful orders, then we got a really bad situation. The problem, as good as our Constitution is, you can have very evil orders that are lawful.
Yes.
And so now we get into an area where we can do things that are very bad for our country or for the world and not be across the line into unlawful. And of course, we also know people can play with legal interpretations and whatnot. What I tell people when I think about that is, you should reflexively do what you signed up to do. Yeah. You have a sense of duty, you have an obligation, you should do that. When it gets to a point where you think it is morally wrong or illegal but not being interpreted that way, you need to make a personal decision there.
Yeah.
And that personal decision is usually to resign, step away.
Yeah.
It's very hard to make, particularly when you're senior, because when you're senior, you start to rationalize, if I step away, someone worse than me will take over.
I have to preserve my access or my good influence.
That's right. But there is a point at which I think enough people have got to step up and say, no, this is just not acceptable. And I think we have skirted against this in recent years.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think there are a number of people who have different enough views on how the country should be that we're probably going to have more of that.
I think so. And also, I think sometimes people are reluctant to speak up or resist or say, hey, I'm not going to do that, because they think they're causing problems for their boss. And this isn't just in the military, it's in companies, et cetera. But actually, you have to flip that in your mind. You're actually doing them a favor, because everyone is looking to everyone else constantly. This is what humans do. We look around and we go, am I the only one that has a problem with this? Right. And when the lower ranks are saying, hey, this is against our conscience, then it gives, sometimes you're going to have a bad boss, someone without a compass who says, shut up, do what you're told. But just as often, you're going to have them go, hey, they're starting to get a little squirmy down here. Let's reconsider this. I mean, a big part of Vietnam is as it goes on, as the soldiers decide more and more they don't want to be the last guy to die in Vietnam for a war that everyone else has abandoned. It's that sort of pushback that starts to apply the real pressure that makes people make some different leadership decisions. And I think you should think about it as, what is the power that I have in this situation, and how could that power positively influence the people below and above me by the decision to say, hey, I'm not going to do this. And I think back to a decision I made early in my career where my boss wanted me to do something that I thought was plainly wrong and also illegal. And I said I wasn't going to do it. And yeah, he just found someone else to do it. I should have resigned in principle, or I should have made a bigger stink about it, but I didn't want to lose my job. And in retrospect, why did I want to keep a job that you could lose for not doing something illegal, right? Like, the other thing to think about is, hey, here's what I think about this. I'm going to voice my opinion. And if there's consequences for that, it's kind of telling you everything you need to know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do. But it's always more complicated than we want to believe, because if you get to the idea of groupthink, which came from the Bay of Pigs study after the fact, and they found that good people who have grave doubts did not speak up.
Yes.
And we see that over and over again. And the problem is, if you're 100% sure it's wrong, then you may speak up. But what if you're in the room and you just kind of think it's wrong, and a bunch of smart people that you respect are going, nope, it's good.
Yeah.
You don't want to look like a fool by saying it's wrong when it's clearly not.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these dynamics that come. And so a dialectic is really important. And this is what leaders should establish in. When you've got really tough decisions, there should be some kind of really pointed discussions that at least bring up the counter arguments.
Yes.
Give people the freedom to get those on the table and look at them and air them out.
I think that's something Kennedy learned from the Bay of Pigs, is what I was so struck by is during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he realizes that his presence, it was then called XCOM, his presence in those discussions was creating a kind of groupthink. So he says, I'm going to leave, you guys work this out. And people were more free to voice their misgivings when the president was absent than when he was in the room. And again, the idea of the dragon's tail, or the dinosaur's tail, understanding your effect on the discussion or the status quo as a leader is important. Sometimes you need to be there to specifically draw it out. Sometimes you need to not be there so it can naturally come out. But you want to create an environment where people are saying what they think, or else you exist in a bubble. I am positive no one told Vladimir Putin that invading Ukraine was a bad idea. There was no universe in which he thought it could go the way that it did. And
I think that's right.
That's how it worked. I mean, that's the trap that dictators get into. And it's the trap that Trump gets himself into. And not that I'm calling him exactly a dictator, but, if the first qualification is how many people do you think attended his inauguration, or did he win in 2020? You have already selected for people who will not tell you unpleasant truths.
Right. And some things require a discussion which takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
Remember, there were, 13 days in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the positions of many of the people evolved pretty starkly throughout that. And I would argue that there are a lot of times we need to do that. You need to iteratively think about it. Here are the counter arguments. I've told a story in a previous book. In 2017, my wife came to me. I had this portrait of Robert E. Lee hanging in my study. And she says, you got to get rid of that. And she had given it to me 40 years before.
Wow.
And it was this painting that I loved. And I thought of Robert E. Lee as a West Pointer, honorable military guy. She says, you need to get rid of it. I said, why? She goes, because people are going to come in here and think you believe in something you don't. This was soon after Charlottesville. And I disagreed. So for a month, we had this discussion.
Yeah.
And I made the counter arguments of this. And finally, I got up one Sunday morning, took it and put it out in the garbage. She was right. And it took a month for me to realize that she was right, or as I say, reach my entirely independent conclusion. But the point is, your thinking has to be, at least most people's thinking, has to be brought along.
Yeah.
And so leaders have got to be prepared to provide that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think, or I would imagine, as you wrestled with what direction you were going to take your life in, having a person who loved you, who believed in you, who didn't identify you and the job, which is probably isn't always the case in some military relationships. You know, some like calling their husband the general, or like the access that, you know, so to have someone who goes, okay, what are we going to do now? You know, or has someone who says, hey, this is how I think you should respond. You need someone, you need that independent voice that can give you sort of honest and real feedback. You think you want a hand-picked board of directors, but you don't. You want an adversarial board, a supportive but adversarial board.
That is so true. Same like in your wife.
Yeah.
You want your spouse to support you, but sometimes the best support is disagreeing with you.
Yes.
I hope she never hears this, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the day I walked in and told my wife that my resignation was accepted, she was a 4-star general's wife, which is something.
Yeah, right.
We're living in a big house, and, you know, it's not all Skittles and beer, but still, it was something. And yet, she had known me as Cadet McChrystal, Lieutenant McChrystal, right? You know, just the knucklehead through all those years. Yeah. So she wasn't blinded by any of the foolishness. Yeah, sometimes it's infuriating, because I met my wife when I was in college, and so yeah, they know you before all this stuff, and you're like, hey, you know, could we update some of the like, could we update? If I met someone new, they would see me as this person, and at the same time, the real saving grace there is, if it all goes away, that never mattered either. Right. And you can laugh at the jokes from the old days. That's the best part of that, is she was there. Yeah. And when I talk about something that happened, she goes, yeah, I was there. I remember that. And laugh at things that are shared history. Yes. And then also, I think the character, like, understanding that character isn't this solitary thing, but a relationship has a character, and a project has a character, an organization has values. There's a sort of larger character, but this idea of like, I'm not just doing it because I believe it is. I don't want to let this person down, or I don't want to betray what this person thinks about me. We talked about the Spartans earlier. I was struck. I didn't realize this until I went back and reread Herodotus, that or maybe it was Plutarch, but that they'd chosen all 300 Spartans because they had sons. And it wasn't because, oh, okay, you know, you might think they make the opposite choice. They choose them not because they've already reproduced. They choose them because they know they won't want to let those children down by turning and running. And I think that can be a sort of a final powerful check. It's not so much legacy, but it's like, hey, this person thinks I believe this stuff. I've gone on record saying this stuff a lot of times. If I act contrary to that right now, what kind of message am I sending to my children or my spouse or whomever? Well, I mean, I think about that every day. If my granddaughters looked at me and they saw me do something sleazy, they'd kind of go, well, wait a minute, Granddaddy, you say don't do that. Yeah. So you can't. Yes. Yeah, I interviewed Tyler Schultz, you know, the whistleblower at Theranos. Yeah. He was more upset with his grandfather than he was Elizabeth Holmes. That it was like, you had this incredible life, you served your country, you do all this stuff, and then in your 80s and 90s, you threw it all away for a chance to have money you would never get to spend. You know, like, you chose this stranger over all these things that you thought were important, and that was the sort of final betrayal. And I do think my generation, although politically it shifts a lot, but I do think that's one of the things that a lot of, as I talk to friends, like what they wrestle with is like, my parents said they believed all these things, and then I see the decisions they make and the people they support and the exceptions they're allowing and rationalizing. Did they not mean any of it? What is that? It's hard. It's been hard. Remember the old song that says couples who hate themselves, their kids hate them for what they're not, but they hate themselves from what they are.
Oof.
And you think about when you know that there is a contradiction between what you've claimed
and
what you are.
Yeah.
The internal conflict to me would be terrifying.
Yes. Or perhaps the problem is there's no awareness of the conflict at all. That's the joy of cognitive dissonance, I guess, or the relief of cognitive dissonance is you don't have to
start to believe you're right.
Yeah. We would like to think it's this vexing inner turmoil, but maybe the problem is there's no turmoil at all.
I think it's true.
You want to go check out some books?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.